My name is David Birnbaum, and I want to introduce you to my daughter, Emma Birnbaum. The topic is cost to value analysis. This is a difficult topic. It starts with a conclusion. The decisions we make do not lead to the results we expect. We can see this going on everywhere. What is the problem? We have a marvelous way of digitizing the supply chain. And from that, PLM and other programs, we think we can make the right decision. And that is the problem. The supply chain is our best idea of how things work. But it's really two-dimensional. It's a chain. And it goes from step 1 to step 2 to step 3. The reality of the world, the reality of how things work, it's multidimensional. I'll give you an example. You take the simplest item in the supply chain, buying a zipper. Now, the customer designates the zipper supplier to the factory. You are going to buy all your zippers from YKK. So the factory in Dominican Republic receives the color quantity breakdown, and he contacts YKK in Santo Domingo to send him the 4 color zippers that he's going to need for the order. Now, the cost of the zipper, as far as PLM is concerned, is 10 cents. We know it's 10 cents because we have an invoice that says 10 cents. But the reality is very different. Imagine you have a factory, you put in the order for the 4 colors of zippers from YKK. You expect delivery in 2 or 3 days. And at the end of the 2 or 3 days, they deliver 3 colors. Not to worry, not to worry, it's okay. Because we're going to go to the national level, of Caribbean countries, and we'll check with them. Take us about 2 or 3 days. Well, it's no problem. You've lost a couple of days, 3 days is not a problem. But then they come back and say, well, I'm sorry, they don't have that color either. Not to worry, we'll go to the regional people in Mexico. And then they come back and they don't have the zipper. But they can dye the zipper. Dyeing the zipper is 21 days. Now you're in trouble. You've already lost 9 days. And so you have 3 color zippers, but there's a delay of 30 days for the 4th color. You have the fabric. You contact the buying office in Hong Kong and say, look, I have 3 color zippers. I don't have the 4th color. What should I do? What do you want me to do? They can't very well delay the entire shipment of the order because of 1 color missing, nor can they ship 3 colors today and 1 color 30 days later. The answer is the fabric you have, the costs that have gone into it is lost. The result is that zipper, will factually cost you 10 cents, when you add all the other expenses, is now costing you $10. The problem is that this is not in the supply chain. We needed another way, another perspective, a way of making decisions knowing that we have counted in all the factors. If you're looking in the decision-making process, then that process should involve the decisions. And this is what cost of value analysis is about. Think of it this way. Cost is what the supplier pays for the product. Price is what the customer pays for the product. Cost is a quantitative thing. You have the materials, you have the manufacturing process, but price is not based on cost. In fact, there is no relationship between price and cost because price is based on value. Think of it this way. You go into a pharmacy to buy a tube of toothpaste, or you go to an automobile agency to buy a BMW car. Do you care what the Colgate people paid for the materials and the manufacturing cost of the tube of toothpaste? Do you really care what BMW paid for their materials and the costs? You buy because you think it's worth the money. You will pay a premium for the toothpaste that you like. Maybe because you like the taste. Maybe because you are anti-fluoride. Maybe because you're worried about the teeth being worn down. But you'll pay for that because it has value. You buy the BMW because you think that has value. That is the same way that you would act if you are buying 50,000 shirts. It's a matter of cost to value. This is how the decisions are made. You have a decision. All decisions have a cost. Whatever you want to do, there's a cost there. All decisions supposedly have a value, there's a benefit, or else you wouldn't be doing it. Where the value is greater than the cost, the decision might make sense. Where the value is less than the cost, you're going to lose money. It's a silly decision. Cost to value analysis is a way of quantifying the decision-making process. There are different costs. The simplest is what we call intrinsic costs, where the cost to the company and the value received is from the same company. For example, you want to increase productivity. There's a cost to increasing productivity. Whether you're increasing productivity by bringing in new machinery, computerized equipment, or whether you're doing by worker training, there's a cost. There is a value which is based on the increased productivity and the lower the garment costs. The customer has to decide which factory should get the order. Okay, that's a decision that's made, and the cost involved that they pay and the value they receive goes to them. How does a customer, how does a retailer, a brand, an importer decide which factory should receive the order? Traditionally, we have a number of factors that we examine, maybe 10 factors, 20 factors, 50 factors, to determine the best factory. Certainly, low FOE price is one of them. Certainly, better quality, better delivery, ease of doing business. These are all factors. So what we do is we go to the factory and we inspect for these 10 factors, and we say, the best in each will get a 10, and the worst gets a 1. So if there are 10 factors, 100 is the best score. If there are 20 factors, 200 is the best score. Yet when you look at this, you look at the process, it's totally irrational. It's all subjective. You have 3 inspectors, Tom, Dick, and Harry. They're all going to different factories. Tom is a real bastard. To get a 5 from Tom, you have to be great. Dick is a good guy, making the honest condition. Harry is lovely. He'll give everybody a 10. It gets worse than that. Who is this Tom character? Is he the cousin of the factory owner? Believe me, in the countries where I've dealt, this is a real factor. Third, the guy who was working in Italy, in Prato, is dealing with some great factories. To get a 10 from this factory, you have to be really good. A 10 from a 5 from this factory in Prato is worth $1 million for the factory in Dhaka. So there's no way of looking at it. In the end, we are assuming that all the factors are the same. That quality is an important factor, that FOB price is an important factor and speed to market is an important factor. But you're dealing with a pair of white running socks or an overcoat. You mean they're all the same? The product changes. In reality, there is an easier, a safer, a more reliable way of doing it if we employ cost to value analysis. And that is, we want to go to the factory where you make the most money. That's so difficult? Look, we have the information. The customer has the information. The customer says, okay, I am looking to buy a merino wool sweater. I have 30 factories located in 10 countries that have produced merino wool sweaters for me. So I know the FOB price on every order. I know the delivery, I know the landed duty paid price of every order, and I know the wholesale price on every order. And I know the profit that we made, the gross profit we made from that order. I know that from this factory, we made a 53. That's 53% gross profit. That factory was 48. The 53 factory has got to be better than the 48 factory. We also know that the guys who you make the greater money, they make greater profit, they must be doing something right. Maybe we should discover what they're doing. Or last year, this was a 51 factory. This was really good. This year, there are 48 factories. What happened? Shouldn't we find out? Or do you know that all the merino wool sweaters that we're buying from this country are below 50%? Why are we working? Why are we doing merino wool sweaters in that country? These are the decisions. What is important to realize is that this does not replace the merchandiser. It gives the merchandiser a tool to begin with. So the merchandiser, by pushing a button, will know which factories they made the most money. Having done that, the merchandiser now begins the process. For example, there are other reasons besides profit that you will make the decision. For example, you have other factories that are so-called strategic suppliers. These are really important people, and they have to get their share of orders. I have to give the order to them. Another factor is that you're missing information. It works this way. There is a database of every location of just about every house for sale anywhere in the developed world. So that if you have a 3-bedroom house in Bloomfield Hills, Michigan, the value of that house, based on the database, is $1.5 million. If it's in East Elmo, Wisconsin, it's $750,000. That is factual based on all the sales that have taken place. But your $1.5 million house, what happens if they discover dioxin? What happens if 3 feet down they discover old hospital waste, hypodermic needles? What is the value of the house then? It moves from 1.5 million to 0. Actually, if you bought the house, you have to pay to clean it up. What is true of the house is true of the factory. What happens if the 53 factory is employing child labor? What happens if the 53 factory is being sued for pollution? So that cost of value does not replace the person on the ground. It gives them the tools to move ahead. Okay? So we've talked about intrinsic costs. The next area is extrinsic costs. This might seem a little strange. An extrinsic cost occurs when the actual costs are incurred by one side, but the benefit goes to another side. For example, you're a factory and you're going to carry out product development for the customer. Okay? The reason is that if you can do it cheaper, you can do it better. But you pay the cost. There's a cost to product development. There's a cost to the pattern making, to the making of the samples. There's a whole series of costs. The benefit goes to the customer. So in cost of value analysis, you are entitled to a profit above and beyond your costs. Both sides save. And by the way, this is the direction that most intelligent customers are going in cooperative relationships. The customer, on the other hand, there are customers such as VF Corporation who send their engineers into their factories to improve quality, to increase capacity, to provide a better product. In many cases, they'll rearrange the factory itself. They'll impose new ideas. The people at VF know that this factory is going to take all these benefits and they're going to use them for other customers. Cooperative relationships like this have been going on for over a decade. And I can't explain it except to say that somewhere down the line, these customers, such as VF, such as PVH, such as Mast Industries, believe that benefit for all is better than benefit for nobody. Okay. Now we're going to go to the soft costs. This is an area which is very important, but very difficult to determine. You know, soft cost quality is a cost. It costs money to produce a better quality garment. How do you calculate cost to benefit, cost to value? We know, we look back in the past, the great example of the Gap, that in 2003 had fired their managing director, Mickey Drexler, who was one of the great merchants of all times. Mickey Drexler built the Gap on the concept that the consumer would pay for a better made garment using better materials. He was not interested in design. He wasn't interested in fashion, but he wanted a well-designed garment that was well made using good material, and he charged a premium. And it worked. When they replaced him, the management looked around and said, you know, my God, we are using materials that are very expensive, working in very expensive factories. We can save money by working with second-class factories, by using materials that are not the greatest. We know what happened. By 2005, the markdown started going up, the volume started going down. It is now 17 years later, and Gap has never recovered. We know that soft costs are real costs to value. The most difficult costs to calculate are the negative costs, sustainability, CSR, corporate social responsibility, because there is a cost. Being sustainable costs more money than not being sustainable. Treating your workers right and paying decent wages, not having excessive overtime, there's a cost to that. But the consumer will not pay the price. So why do people do it? And the answer is there's a negative here. The negative is, yes, you can get away with it. You can get away with employing children. But one day, when the truth comes out, not only is you or the factory will be out of business, but chances are your customer, the retailer, will be out of business. It's the same problem we have with fire insurance. Why do people insure the house for fire? You think about it, the chances of a fire breaking down, your house burning down, oh, come on. It's once in 100 years it'll happen. But the answer is, yes, it might not happen, but if it does happen, you will lose the greatest asset you have. You personally will be broke. So these are the type of costs. Let's hold it up there. Emma, you want to step in?
Yes, I think that it's worthwhile going back to the beginning of what you said, where you were talking about the perception that the supply chain is linear, the linearity, the step-by-step process, and that within the industry, we get caught up in moving from one step to the next step. And so it gives us the notion that things exist within a sort of straight line. And I think that part of this problem is cultural. There is the practical side of what you're talking about, the quantifiable side, but then there's the cultural application, rethinking how the industry functions, how decisions are made, and how processes occur. And this to me is really where a lot of the effort has to be made, because what you've essentially outlined is moving from a totally linear two-dimensional process, which probably served the industry perfectly well in the 1970s, when everybody was producing the same thing to a consumer who really didn't have an opinion, where the only thing that really mattered was competing to lower costs, because everything produced that was the same, everything was being retailed at the same price, excuse me. But what we're looking at today is a totally different ecosystem, where in order for companies to be successful, they have to specialize in niche markets, specialize in skill sets, specialize in technology. And this level of specialization requires a different infrastructure for determining in terms of facilitating decision-making. And this is where cost to value really plugs in, when we're moving from a two-dimensional line to a dynamic web. And this dynamic web that we're operating in, where conversations are occurring simultaneously between a factory and a designer, between a factory and their accountant, between a merchandiser and a designer, requires a whole new method of quantifying how decisions are made. And this is where I think everything that you've just discussed really plugs in, that what we're looking at is a holistic data aggregator to facilitate intelligent business decisions based on increasing profit and lowering cost. And so when you give the example of the Ziffer, that is a microcosm of the entire supply chain, or the entire supply web at this point. And being able to not just aggregate the data that that each entity is innately producing, whether you're a factory or you're a customer, but being able to comprehensively use that data to facilitate internal decision-making that will lead to long-term growth and increased profits, and allow you to make calculated decisions. So for example, maybe you realize that you need to change your business operations. You need to hire new people. You need to shift the type of product that you're creating. That might lead to an immediate deficit in profit because you have to make an investment. I mean, Amazon is the perfect example of a company that wasn't profitable until like 20 years after it came into existence, right? They made constant investment in their company. And that has led to, excessive profit at this point. And they're able to do that because they're making decisions based on an understanding of what they're putting out and what they're integrating into their establishment. So I think it's important to look at a holistic industry and look at how your role within that holistic industry.
You bring up a really important point, which I neglected. This is on a cost sheet. Costs go on a cost sheet. The cost sheet that tells you the costs is insufficient, because the decision always has two parts to it. What came before and what came after. There's always before and after. And so you want to compare the benefit. You know it costs more money. You know it costs more money, but you can see that the costs are more than satisfied by the increase in profit. It gets more complicated than that. We have what are called opportunity costs, which we never get to understand. You want to improve, you want to improve your productivity. It's a very good example. You have two ways of doing it. One is you bring in high-tech machinery, computerized machinery, robotic machinery. There's a cost to that. And that cost has to be paid for, it has to be amortized over a period of time. The period of time has to be the time that will absorb the costs before you have to replace it again, maybe 5 years, 6 years. Okay? And then you want to see the benefit. The 40-minute shirt becomes a 30-minute shirt. And you can see that by becoming a 30-minute shirt, you will have fewer workers, and the profits go up. But there's another side to this. And that is maybe you don't have to bring in capital equipment. Maybe you have worker training. Maybe you can bring in specialists who will bring your workers to a point where instead of being dealing in single tests, they can be multi-test. So that would allow you to produce smaller sized orders. Again, there's a cost to that. You have to pay the specialists, and it's not cheap. Believe me, do the job right, will take 6 months to a year. So in the end, you have a 3-part cost sheet. This is the cost you have now. This is the cost that you will have compared to the benefits of bringing the machinery. And this is the cost and benefit you have by training your workers. And you can see, well, actually, I'll make more money by going either with worker training or by going with capital equipment. But having taken one decision, you're not taking the other. Through cost of value analysis, you can say, well, you know something, the machinery will increase my profitability by 5%. Worker training will increase my profitability by 10%. So you can see of the alternatives available to you, while both will give you a benefit, there is a greater benefit one to the other. This is how we have to look at things. We have to understand the nature of what we're dealing with and to go further into it. You will see once you have a way of analyzing the decision-making process.
I think I just want to interrupt. You know,
Yeah.
one of the values, and I think this is an extrapolation of what you've just expressed, is that having the data, having the knowledge about what is actually going on within your company or what's going on between different stakeholders gives you the ability to make subtle changes that eventually will lead to a totally new business model. And this is a positive thing. It's not binary. It's not black and white. You know, I'm working with leather today. Oh my God, the fashionistas are going to find out and they're going to destroy my tannery business. No, it gives you the power to start making intelligent decisions that are going to lead to a new way of working in order for you to evade any potential future problems. And so it is a process of adopting the new method that is what brings success rather than flipping a switch overnight. And I think this is where cost of value as a tool really lends itself, that it gives you real insight into where value is being created within your enterprise. And this is something that sounds very obvious. Of course, you know, I am an incredibly profitable company. I know where value is being created. And what I would say from our experience, Dave, and my experience, is that most profitable companies don't understand where the value is actually being created. They think it's happening, you know, in New York, when in fact it's probably happening in Hong Kong or China. But understanding that value, whether it's maybe in product development, maybe you've really innovated in manufacturing, maybe you're offshoring your design so that designers are able to work effectively with the factory floor. understanding that value creation will enable you to increase it, and it will also allow you to stop investing in things that don't create any profit whatsoever. And so this is really an important tool set. Sorry.
I think you brought up a really important point here. In our industry structure today, our management structure, the area where the stuff is made is virtually unknown to senior management at home. They're interested in design, they're interested, by the way, in finance, they're interested in profit, they're interested in expansion. Fabric, garment making, the actual making process, do me a favor, ship a decent product on time and leave me alone. This has been the attitude of management for years. And yet, in many areas, the greatest problems facing the company can be solved at the factory level. The greatest cost of a garment is not the material, it's not the labor, it's not the FOB. The greatest cost of a garment is the markdown. That is the difference between the price on the hang tag that you see in the store and the average price that the retailer receives after all sales and discounts. In fashion goods, we're talking about 35% off retail price. This means that the markdown rate is not only greater than the FOB price, it's greater than the landed duty paid price. If you can solve the markdown problem, the savings will be more than the FOB price. The funny thing is the only place you can solve the markdown is at the factory. Why do goods get marked down? I mean, serious question. They got marked down because they don't sell. Is it because the designer's incompetent? Is it because her boss, the merchandiser, doesn't know what he's doing? It has to do with time. If your lead times between first design and garment delivery in the store are 30, 40 weeks, it's impossible for a designer to design something decent. In order to not to avoid the terrible losses, you wind up producing what we call lowest common denominator design, which is boring stuff. This is one reason why the e-commerce startups with all their problems have this great customer base, because they're doing interesting stuff. You can't do interesting stuff because it takes too long. If you can speed up the process, then you get the savings. To do that, you have to have speed to market. Speed to market is a very complex and difficult process. First, you have to move the product development to the factory. Not only saves you money, but the all-important QA, quality assurance, the ability of the factory to make the stock as the sample. Well, if you made the sample in New York and then at the last minute send it to the factory, you don't know if the factory can make it. If the factory made the sample, they have to be responsible to make the stock the same way. You maintain design integrity. The sample looks like the original sketch. The sample is what the designer wants, and the stock is what the designer asked for. The garment can be engineered to fit into a price point. But most important, what took 20 weeks on a traditional level can be done in 3 weeks at the factory. Do that, and the goods are being designed much closer to sale. And it gives you two great advantages. One, something that was invented by Zara 40 years ago, you have trial orders. Zara designs goods, and they produce 1,000 pieces of the style to send it in to see what happens. If you have 7,000 stores, 1,000 pieces is not a big order. And 4 days later, they see which of the styles sell. If you receive 10 styles and 3 of them sell, those are the 3 they produce. If none of them sell, well, scrap it and we start again with the same fabric. Designer has the lowest markdown rate in the industry because they literally design after sales. You can do the same. You can do the same with trial orders if you move fast enough. Not only that, but you can have quick response. Today's world, the fabric comes in, the factory receives the order, you have to cut up everything. Because you don't get 2 bites of the apple, it just takes too long. But if you have real speed to market, you can have quick response. You send in, the factory sends in 25% of the goods they have. And then they wait. And then they hear, this is the size that's selling, we want this size, we want that size. And they can give you reorders. Now, the big factor here in markdown reduction is the factory. They're the only ones who can do this. But to do this, you have to have this relationship between the customer and the factory, because the customer understands that markdowns is not a curse of God. It's not with us like the 10 plagues. It is because we've screwed up the lead times. And there we have an opportunity now to move ahead. This is where the industry has to go if you're going to survive. We can't afford 35% markdowns and stay in business. We are now operating at a point where we're taking our in-store costs, the costs of FOB, duty, freight, everything, and we're multiplying it by four times. I mean, it means that in the end, that all things considered, a garment with a $10 FOE price is costing between $60 and $80 at least, because we're going to lose it again in markdowns. You do away the markdowns, the consumer benefits, the store benefit. But to do that, you have to understand the problem, and you have to understand the solution, what the costs are. In a cost of value analytical cost sheet, we were able to estimate that a garment that had a $10 FOB price, the savings to the customer at the end would be over $10. While at the same time, the factory that was making 5% would be making $2.50 after allowing for the costs. This is truly a cooperative relationship where, because people see the cost in front of them, you don't have to rely on custom fill, you don't have to rely on somebody outside expert. You can see the dollars and cents yourself. We can't afford to do anything less. We have to move forward. Emma, your turn.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, really what you're talking about is our agile business models. And one of the biggest problems that I see in the apparel industry at the moment is the fact that there's this preconceived notion that customers look like this. They have middle management, they have a C-suite executives that don't really know anything about the industry, but know enough. They have designers, and all the designers have, are followed by teams of like design assistants that never really go to the factories. And then a factory, there is much more agility in the business model, but that a factory has a specific relationship with a customer where they're the subordinate and the customer dictates the terms of their existence, essentially. And the reality is that that is a very outdated concept. It doesn't work in today's world. And cost to value is the tool that allows you to adapt to whatever niche you have to fill, and it gives you the ability to design your own business model for your own vision. And I think it's applicable to all stakeholders in the industry, whether you're a customer, whether you're a factory. If you're a factory that specializes in lean manufacturing and speed to market, and you can't find customers beyond that of Inditex, then it makes sense with those skill sets and technologies, you can go and start developing your own customers. Go and find a whole bunch of influencers on social media who have their brand, who have the skill sets required to sell and market, and develop for them. You already, that factory, that lean factory already has that ability. And so it's a matter of using cost value as a tool, accessing the data that you're already generating, and devising your own business model.
As you know, I spent a lifetime in strategic development. And one thing I've learned is the great strategies are simple and obvious. If you want to make the right business decision, it might help if you understood the cost and the value. Why is it Zara introduced speed to market 40 years ago? Why are people still arguing on the viability of speed to market? Zara is the most profitable retailer in the world in garments. Why don't we accept it and move on? And the answer is that the people who make the decisions are living in the past. It takes so long to get to the top that by the time you get to the top, you really don't know anymore. You know, it's a story. The CEO goes to the head of logistics and he says, Fred, Mr. Wang, who's a reliable supplier, has come to us, and Mr. Wang says that instead of shipping FOB, instead of shipping landed duty paid, he's going to ship directly to the stores. He'll take away everything so that he'll be responsible for the whole thing. Well, Fred thinks about this, and the first thing that comes to his mind is, I have a $3 million mortgage, 2 kids at university, and 1 kid in rehabilitation, and you're asking me, should I give up my job? If Mr. Wang is taking over logistics, what am I going to do? Instead of saying, well, this is a great idea, and knowing it's going to take years to get this thing through because Mr. Wang is 1 factory out of 700, you have to change it overall. His attitude is to his boss, he said, are you crazy? Who's this Wang guy? He's going to put it, in 6 months, you'll be out of business if you listen to him. This has been Fred's reaction since the first caveman came out of the cave selling saber-toothed tiger coats. We have to get rid of that. And the only way of getting rid of it is to understand the process yourself and to make it readily available. We can't live in the past. What we're offering here is a way into the future. And if I'm not mistaken, there'll be a lot of professionals who will have comments, criticisms, and questions. If you're asking people to change their entire perspective of how business is carried out and how it's been carried out since the year 1, there are people who might have other opinions. We want to be there to field the questions, to listen to the criticism, and to give you answers. Please, thank you very much.
Thank
Emma?
you. Yes, I just add to what you're saying, which is that, while we're talking about a new methodology and potentially a new technology, what we're really talking about is a cultural shift and a culture that requires a lot more information exchange, that no longer operates as a hierarchy, that where everything is sort of horizontal and each stakeholder is treated as an equal. And while that might sound very optimistic, overly optimistic, the reality is at this point, it's good for business. It's the only way to be profitable. And I think that tying back to what we were talking about before, if that's okay, when we discuss generational shifts, the younger generation to a large degree recognizes this, that at the end of the day, the numbers tell the story in themselves. Going to where the profit is created is really what is necessary to build a viable business. And that making decisions based on bias, prejudice, and cousin Phil is not working out so well. And so we are at this momentous changing point of where a younger generation is coming in and taking over the old industry and discussing cultural changes that are necessary is very pragmatic because it is going to happen anyway. It is innate to generational change as well.
I think some of the stuff, I'm from the old generation. I live in a totally paranoid industry. Not only won't the customer tell the factory what's going on. The people, the executives in the company won't even tell their bosses what's going on. It's all a secret that, we're not going to let the information out because, it's mine. And that will disappear. One of the things that's true about Emma's generation, it is far more cooperatively inclined. The concept of the zero-sum game, the concept of winning, is being replaced by the concept of being profitable and being and having a good company. It's not.
Yes, and I would also say that there are new technologies like federated learning that allows information to be retained to an internal company, internally within a company, but facilitate the establishment and customization of algorithms that enable tailor-made decision-making. And so really the technology to solve the problem of like cultural paranoia exists, and it's just a matter of implementing it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.